Hey everybody, I'm Lindsay Adler, and this is a photo deconstruction. In my photo deconstructions, I select one of my images and I show you how I created that image, whether it's the inspiration, the behind the scenes, or a little bit of the post-processing. So I get inspiration from lots of different places. Sometimes it's books, sometimes it's movies, sometimes it's songs, sometimes it's an artist. And in this case, it was somewhat of an unusual inspiration. I was actually inspired by a background. So I was on Adobe Stock, and I was looking for backgrounds that I could put behind my subject and print out large canvas prints. And so I was looking at Western backgrounds, and I was looking at seascape backgrounds, and then I saw this one that looked kind of like an enchanted forest. And I thought to myself that I could create some kind of interesting beauty image out of this, something that was imp-like and something that was maybe a little bit of a Lord of the Flies. And so I started with the background as my inspiration. So I knew the background had ferns and it had trees, and so I set out to create my imp-like creature. So I went to the floral district of New York, which I'm very lucky to have, and I was wandering around. So I'm looking for different elements. And so there was moss and ferns and bark, and I started to collect little things to create my character. And so this is the image that I came up with. I actually came up with two different versions. This one's a little bit more refined and elegant, and this one is a little bit more of a wild creature, a little bit more Lord of the Flies. So that background is completely fake, but this is 100% shot in the studio. So I want to show you how it's done. So let's take a look behind the scenes. All right, so in this behind the scenes view, you can see how this scene was put together. So behind my subject, you can actually see the canvas print. This is what I got from Adobe Stock. And this print was printed on a Canon Pro 4000 on a canvas. So this is going to give me a big, beautiful background that's plenty big for if I'm shooting a beauty image or a mid-length shot like I am here. All right, so taking a look to analyze this, first of all, I didn't want this to feel like it was shot in the studio. So I wanted to give myself some depth. So that's where you can see all those ferns coming into play. We put some behind the subject, some in front of the subject, and that way there was a sense of her actually being on location instead of being stuck in front of a background. So it was all about the illusion that I could create. So let's take a look at the lighting. We'll start with the main light. So the main light is actually over here on the left-hand side. It is a medium umbrella with diffusion and CTO. Basically, it's a soft light source off to the side with a little bit of warmth to it. I didn't use a full color temperature orange. I just used a little bit of warmth. And I have some of that spilling on the background to make it warmer. Now, actually looking at the print, if you look at the top of that print, you can see how the light, like the light in the picture is a little bit warmer. I was trying to emulate that with some of the light hitting the subject's face. Okay, so the next thing is you can see how that light is top down in the print. So right, it's glowing from above her head. So to give that illusion, I used a light both for the background and as a hair light. So that is above her head to the left here, and it's a large umbrella with diffusion. So that top-down light is kind of like the sun glowing from above and behind her, and it also lights the background so that doesn't fall too dark. A little bit of light kicking on the background makes it look like the background is glowing. And then, because the main light is far off to the side, and then there's a background light, there's no light from the front really. And so what I've done is I've added a fill light. That fill light is a large umbrella with diffusion. So basically, it's a soft light source that I can turn up or down in order to control the shadows. I don't think I want the shadows to fall too dark on my subject, so that's why a fill light is necessary rather than just a reflector, because bringing it in might actually get into my shot. All right, so the last thing I want to talk about is the gear. I used a Canon 5D Mark IV and a 70-200mm lens. The reason I liked it is I could use a longer focal length for the tight shot, the vertical shot of my subject, and then I could also pull back for a wider focal length for the horizontal shot that you saw. All right, so I want to show you one more perspective, another shot behind the scenes. So you can see here a little bit better the depth that we have with these real ferns. You could have used fake ones. At craft shops a lot of times have fake ferns, but I have them staggered to create the illusion of depth. And then you can also see the actual background here. It's canvas. It's not even straight. It's not about it being perfect. It's all about an illusion. So you can see the main light off to the right, the warm main light. Then you can see the hair light overhead and how a lot of that light's going to spill onto the background. And then you can see the fill light behind me just a little bit better. So let's go back to those final shots. I want to show you what was captured in camera versus what I did for processing versus what was done in Photoshop. All right, so this is the final picture. I love it looks kind of refined. We actually used, what's wrapping around her is actually bark. So it was like it was everywhere, but it made some really nice natural textures, which I also think mimicked her hair. The ferns around her, I had really carefully placed to create kind of a circular composition. And they mimicked the textures in the background as well. So let's look at the straight out of camera shot. This is what the file looked like, just completely out of camera, no processing, the raw. And you can actually see all of the lights that we used in the scene. So for example, the soft light that you can see here, creating that little triangle of light underneath her eye, that is the medium umbrella with the CTO. Then the light that's hitting her hair and also the bridge of her nose, that's that large umbrella overhead. And it's kicking a little bit of light on the background. And then this little highlight on her cheekbone here and the fill light in the front of her body, that's that other umbrella that was directly behind camera. So it's those three lights working together. So this is straight out of camera, but as I'm shooting, I'm tethered and I'm adjusting the file. I am playing with the white balance and I'm playing with the clarity. And so this is what I came up with before ever entering Photoshop. So you can see what I did. I warmed up the white balance. When I did, it looked a little bit too yellow, so I pulled out back on the saturation. And I wanted that shine on her face to really pop, so I popped the highlights. So the shine gets brighter, the highlights get brighter, and then I increased the clarity a little bit to bring out some of the detail in the shadows and throughout the shot. So that right there is before I've ever entered Photoshop. And then this is what I did in Photoshop. Before I click it, I looked at the photo and I wanted to clean up some blemishes, maybe a few hairs, maybe darken down some unwanted highlights. And so really it's just cleanup. Fundamentally, what I got in camera is real close, especially what I was able to achieve with just a little bit of raw processing. So let's look at the other version of this scene. This one I went a little bit heavier in post. Now, you'll notice that she's facing the other way. Originally, I had her facing the other direction. And when we were blowing her hair, we let her hair down. We wanted something a little bit more wild, a little bit more Lord of the Flies. We let her hair down. And when she turned away from the light, if you'll look, it's not actually correct lighting, but sometimes cinematic is about being a little bit incorrect. It's supposed to be more like reality, moving in and out of scenes. When it's too perfect, it looks studio lit. So when she turned away, I actually thought it looked more cinematic because it wasn't perfect. So you can still see the overhead light on her hair, which makes it glow and look fiery. The medium umbrella is what's hitting the side of her face there. And then the umbrella behind camera is what you see for the catch light in her eyes. So this one has a little bit more post-processing on. I want to show you why. So here's what I had straight out of camera. Straight out of camera, it's a little bit flat. I knew I wanted to pop a lot of contrast in there, and I really wanted to play up the warmth in her hair. So this is what I achieved with the raw processing. I went a little bit warmer, a little bit more oranges, popped out a little bit more detail in her face. For the Photoshop part, I cleaned up all the hairs. I really warmed up the reds in her hair. But you'll also see something a little bit weird. I made her front eye, the eye closest to camera, bigger. I did that for two reasons. One, if you compare the shots here, the back eye was bigger, so I wanted to even them out. But I also thought if she's meant to be this wild imp-like creature, I picture them sometimes having these enlarged eyes. They're a little bit surreal, a little bit more animalistic. So in the final retouch, I really popped her eye out and I made her skin a little bit more pale. So this one had a little bit more to the post-processing, but fundamentally I had all of the key elements to work for in the original raw file. So for this inspiration, it was actually unusual. I got inspired by scrolling through backgrounds on Adobe Stock, trying to find a scene that I could transport my subject to. And then rather than compositing them onto it, I actually wanted to shoot an in-camera composite. How could I light this to unify the subject with the background and shoot that scene all in camera? And the way that you see I have the layering of the ferns, it'd be very hard to fake that in post-processing. So doing it in camera is going to be a lot more effective for me. And I can also see and move my subject in ways I might not have imagined if I were trying to think of how I may composite it. So I started off with the background, and then I created depth and created a scene and created a character. In the end, I feel like it has a little bit of a Lord of the Flies look to it. I really hope that you found this photo deconstruction useful. I'm Lindsay Adler, and if you'd like to see more of these videos, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel.